earlier today. We've replaced Matt Ray with Pat McAfee. No, we've replaced him with Brian Gracely. So only 3 people in the world that watch this podcast will get that. But Pat McAfee was someone brought in on the College Game Day to juice up the ratings. What else? What could we do? Could we bring in like a child? Isn't that what people do? They bring in like a child actor just to like spice up the comedy show after several years. So that's what we're doing today. We're gonna have Brian come on and hopefully bring us some of the love from the Cloudcast.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Or like an animal. You could bring an animal on too.
That's right. It was this or a dog. Although if people have been watching it, Matt Ray does sometimes hold his dog. Although the dog still barks, so I don't know why. I don't even know what the point of that is. That's just him doing that for no reason.
Oh, you know what we should have as a to give the post producer Brandon some assignments here. I think it was Michael Neal. Is it Neal's? I apologize, but
Michael Neal.
He got a screenshot of Matt Ray spilling his juice on his keyboard. That was priceless. It was fantastic.
It was good. Maybe we should make that some of the after show art. I don't know. It's not a really flattering. I hate to do that to Matt Ray. But maybe that's part of being the talent. Sometimes you don't always get to pick your.
Exactly. I think, as Brian knows, if you're going to be in the podcasting game, every now and then there's going to be an unflattering screenshot of you, or at least maybe. Well, you're getting into video, right, Brian? How's that going?
He's on the TikTok. I've seen him doing some.
It's not good. I mean, you realize how fast you're getting old.
I think that is the enterprise IT experience of TikTok. McKinsey rates it as not good. Even it's off of the star dog chart, just not even on there.
No, I do like the TikTok. I do like it's very humbling, right? You're just like, oh, this I don't know, this cat video got 8 million views. Like I got 27. You're always like, okay, all right, good. So
yeah, and you're like, and I explained how to reduce your AWS bill by 15% in 2 minutes. I get nothing.
I get nothing. Nobody cares. So all right, Coté. Whenever you're ready, we can get going.
All right. Well, we're all friendly IT nerdy people around here. Some of us might know more about sports than others and things like that, which is fine. But essentially, we know all the nerd lingo. And I was reading a transcript of a podcast with the CEO of AWS, and he used a word that I encountered in the 90s when I was a new programmer. And it comes up every now and then. And when I was reading him say it, not really because it was him, but just in the context of it, which is to say, I don't know why this thought occurred to me, but it did. He used the word orthogonally. And I had this reaction to it. I was thinking, that word is cool, but I want to propose to to the fellow nerd world that maybe what we should do is stop using the word orthogonal and orthogonally in the variants, and instead choose between the words different and unrelated. And I just wanted to run that by you guys. Like, technically, none of us are Andrew Clay Schaefer here, who's going to give us an impromptu pickup math lesson. But orthogonally, I think means at a 90-degree angle, which I believe, if I remember my geometry, that is perpendicular, or a T-bone, to use the vernacular of a driver instructor. And metaphorically, the way that we use it is to say, I think that it is either different or unrelated. But I don't know. What do you think? Is my proposal going to go through the Global Nerd Congress?
But it doesn't sound nearly as advanced, or I don't know. Just it's not enough management speak. Don't you think that's part of just like where the word gets a little bit of it's just like, it's just like when people use big words and it's just like, wow, look how smart I am. Like I just said something that way, and they just have like a long math. So I don't know. I think that's where I don't know. It feels like, especially in the sense of an AWS like writing and just communication style, I feel like there's probably something that comes from it. I don't know, Brian, what do you think? What are your thoughts on orthogonal?
I mean, it definitely fits in the big word smart person category. I like T-bone. I would like to see that take off. It's like there's that Seinfeld episode where George just decided he wanted to be called T-bone, and then everybody else in the room thought it was kind of cool. I think Coté, I think you should chart.
Okay. Well, let's take it for a test run here. I'm going to read the quote. How do you? I don't want to mess it up, so instead of embarrass myself, how do you say his last name? Adam
Selipsky.
Selipsky.
I say
Okay.
Selipsky. Go for it, Dow. It doesn't matter.
All right. So here's what AWS Adam said. Hey, he's responding to a question, and I love there's some good informal. We'll get to this interview. He says, "Hey, Amazon or any of the other big cloud providers, they thought they had a database business or they thought they had a storage business, but instead, I'm an AI company who does this completely different thing. I'm looking at the world T-bone-ish." So now to be clear, that was a theoretic thing that an AI company was saying, not what AWS Adam was saying, right? They're talking about the AI market. And he's like, this is how AI companies would be thinking. Now, I didn't take the time to rephrase that sentence so you could put a noun in there instead of adverb.
Say it's like a T-bone shaped problem. We see the world as a T-bone shaped problem. There you go.
Okay. Yes.
I just because T-bone, it can mean so many different things. That's what's great about it. And it also calls your attention to you have to actually figure out what you mean, like T-bone a car, like a car accident, like a steak, or just different. I like it, Coté. I think, although I can't ever see Selipsky saying that, right? Or Jassy. If Jassy was up there just mid-sentence and he was just like, yeah, we T-boned this. That would be a great moment in keynote history.
I think the way you might nounize it would be to say, that is a T-bone concept, or you've got to use the T-bone to describe
a different concept
thinking or something like that. It's a T-bone positioning.
Or you could use it the same way that people talk about let's take an aside, or that's a good thought.
T-bone it.
Let's T-bone that. Let's set it aside for now.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Okay. See, it's through just like Amazon, it's through this open, challenging debate that we arrive at the best conclusion, which is it's like a parking lot. Like right next to the parking lot is the T-bone. So we're going to T-bone it. That's right. Let's see it. If a car is leaving the parking lot and it runs into an unrelated thing, you've T-boned. I think. Well, we should introduce our guest co-host, Brandon. Who do we have with us today?
We have Brian Gracely, good friend of the show, friend of the Cloudcast, friend, person, the biggest Wake Forest fan we know. So Brian, welcome to the show. Yeah, welcome back to the show, in fact.
Thanks for having me. I feel like I am sort of disrupting the natural, you guys have this whole multi-continent thing, and I feel like I'm skewing it a little bit, but I appreciate last minute filling in for Matt. I'll do my best to sort of talk about obscure technologies as if I know what I'm talking about.
That would be perfect.
Anytime something feels maybe something you want to talk about, don't worry about it if you feel like it's orthogonal to what we're discussing. You can totally T-bone up this episode. I think no need to worry. All our minimum requirement is to have at least 3 time zones. So I think I think we're settled.
We accomplished that. That's a good point, Coté.
And also, I would like to add that we recorded an hour earlier than usual. So this lineup, I'm loving it. It's great. I get a little bit of extra time. Before we get to to pick a topic that is, I don't know what a 45-degree angle T-bone is. Maybe we could call it an acute
topic.
We could call it, what do they call the when you have a chicken leg and a thigh attached in Australia? We've learned that there's a strange name for that. But to use something that it's not a T-bone, it's more like just at a 45-degree angle. Although I guess a chicken thigh and a chicken bone are what are your triangle types? You got the acute and obtuse.
Could be like a frog leg.
Okay. Yes. Once again. Okay. So it's frog leg related. Further in one of our favorite topics around here, and also in the Cloudcast, and you covered this quite a bit recently, Brian, but there was we need to come up with a new phrase of it, but let's say the further aging of open source, nearing the so-called quote unquote death of open source, which of course, I mean, I just want to disclaim right away that phrasing is always absurd. Whenever you declare some technology dead, what you just mean is it has changed a lot into something else or been mostly replaced. Its importance, its the way we used to think about it has changed dramatically, right? Like I'm sure we all remember when I think Microsoft Office has been dead many times, and that is never happened. So essentially what happened is another company, HashiCorp, everyone knows. Is it Core or Corp? I guess you say Corp.
I think it's Corp.
Okay, so you have HashiCorp, and they, I think, correct as always, Brandon, and now Brian, correct me where I get the details wrong, but they moved from the Mozilla license to a BSL license, which I'm not a legal expert or anything, but I think the license they moved to is we don't want the big cloud providers to take our money, as far as I can tell. That's pretty much what those licenses are. And I don't know. I was thinking about this ahead of recording, and I was thinking like this sort of, as I was saying last episode, shifting of norms in the open source world to, as Matt Ray might say, it's not open. Like it almost seems like every time I read the quarterly reports for the public cloud vendors, and it's like, yep, seems to be increasing, right? I'm not sure. It's like a force of nature at this point that open source businesses are almost like trying to figure out how to eliminate competition as much as possible. And
I think, I don't know, maybe another way to think of it is, because lots of people have written about the BSL or the BUSL, depending on, which way you want to think of it. And I think the net of it is just sort of like, and maybe this is the moment, right, where we can say things have shifted. It's just sort of like, hey, if you look at venture capitalists and public investors, we just kind of think about that, people that invest in these companies, right? I think one way to think of it is that group of people ultimately believes, or is basically, kind of like saying to management, like, hey, you need to make more money. And the distinction there is that people believe by providing the open source version only, right, and not having any other like way to, if you will, prevent other people from making money off it, is ultimately, putting a drag on their earnings. And I think that's where all this comes from. Right? So those companies, and it's not just HashiCorp. We should go back and say there's like a whole bunch. There's probably like 4 or 5. And so all of those companies that are facing those kind of pressures, I think at this point, I mean, I do kind of feel like at this point, we just sort of need to accept it, right? That they are ultimately going to be faced with making some decision like this. And it seems pretty consistent that they feel like ultimately to make more money, they need to have some type of limitation, right? And so the only other alternative to that is I think Adam Jacob is probably the one I see kind of advocating this the most, right? It's sort of like the other side of that would be something like, no, if we make a great open source project, then ultimately what happens is it becomes super popular. Other people make money, but it's the whole idea of like rising tide floats all boats, right? And we do that, and everyone makes money, and then we end up making more money. But I don't know. And it's, I love you, Brian's son on this. Like when I think of my own personal experience, recounted on the show many times, where I've been, in the midst of doing it, it has not worked out that way, right? After any amount of effort. And it's been very frustrating. So like when I hear Adam say it, I sort of like nod, but I think to myself, this doesn't usually work that way. So I get where these companies are coming from. Even if you don't like it, I understand the pressures. I don't know, Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I think my favorite internet phrase around open source is always when somebody chimes in and goes, well, they just need to build a better product. They need to build a deeper moat. And you kind of want to go, there is no moat. Like inherently, none of you guys want a moat around your software. So yeah, it's I don't know. We love the idea. I think the thing is we love the idea in software or around this stuff to just ignore anything that has to do with risk, right? Like take all concept of risks out of play. We love that until somebody says, I would like to make some money for my efforts. And we all sort of seem to get that concept, except when it comes to, using software. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is definitely like a reinvent T-Bone moment, right? Everybody is like, I'm going to get reinvented. And so I'm going to T-Bone and shift to not let them, take my business. Like it's, I mean, maybe the way to think about it is this, like they didn't really shift their license. They just ended the free trial period. So instead of like a 14-day free trial, they had like a 7-year free trial, and they just decided to end that. and you shouldn't be upset about it. You should be happy for the experience.
It
Right?
was
Like, it's like,
along the way.
don't be sad that it's over. Be happy that you experienced it.
You know, I think the one
Yeah.
place that people get in trouble, and this is the part where I think as we kind of like, if we are kind of in this shift from kind of like, you know, it's going to be free forever, everything's great, you know, open source now, open source forever. And I think what happens is it's just kind of back to the old defaults lifestyle. It's like people get used to that. That's what they expect, right? And now we're kind of living through this change. Whereas, and this is what I'm interested in going forward. It's sort of like, maybe this will give more of the companies, if you will, the confidence, if you will, to just declare up front, right? Like if I'm a company and I'm starting today, and if they choose to be open source, they should be clear about why they're doing it, right? Like if it's to like promote their product and get it out there, that's fine. But at the same time, they should be clear about like, no, we are going to ultimately want to make money and we're going to have some type of commercial license. Because I think what happens is just people, you know, feel like it's never, you know, rightfully or wrongfully, it's just sort of like assumptions. Like you always make, you know, again, like as the old saying, assumptions, right? It always gets you in trouble. But you know, then I think that's the friction, right? That's the friction point now. And so maybe going forward, if people, I think and I just think like, to me, the shortcut, as I've said on the show many times, is like, if you're a company, you've taken venture capital and you're pursuing what you would hope to be an IPO or a public markets outcome, then I just kind of assume that eventually along the way is going to be some licensing changes, right? Like I just sort of embed that in the way I think of your company. But maybe if people were more clear, it would be kind of keep people from being so frustrated when the change happens. What do you think, Coté?
Yeah, you know, I think I think we've discussed this so much over the years, and so like what I try to think of is a model to like run in my head to know when the game is over, or you know when the open question is solved. And like the model I've been formulating in my head recently around this is like, so let's say we divide, broadly speaking, being open source as a company into two parts, two reasons you would do it. One of them is what we've been talking about more or less, which is like the business of it, right? So if you want to be in the programming and infrastructure business, the wisdom over the past 10 years would be maybe 10 or 15. I've kind of lost track of when 2008 was. But like, you should start as open source, right? And then you can go into the like Byzantine bramble patch of like open core versus this thing versus whatever, right? You can like debate all those kind of like narcissism of small differences things. So there's like the business of it. And it seems like a lot of what we've been seeing in the past, I forget when the Elastic thing was, but let's say 2 to 3 years, is kind of like shutting down that business part, being more or less like, you don't really need open source to be a business in this space, especially because of like, you know, you could just get stuff as a service, whichever, you know, S, P, or I you want to put in front of that, or whatever the 15 things that Gartner has is. And like, but then the other side is like the production side of it, which is, so again, in our area, if you're going to be developing cloud software, which is to say not SaaS, when does it become possible to have, let's just pick the most recent, like a product like Kubernetes become as successful as Kubernetes without it being open source? So like, what's the constraint you're operating in if you want to introduce some new technology, which could be productized or not productized? Or we need a model for like, there's a consortium, we need a name for, there's a consortium of people or a community of people who make an open source product and then they commoditize it, kind of like Kubernetes has been done. Maybe there's some word for that, like the web, but like at what point do we say you no longer have to do open source to get a Kubernetes like success as far as adoption, usage, and desire around something? And I think like it's that second one that like pragmatically, that's where the focus is, because the whole business thing, like that seems like it's about ready to come out of the oven and it's like fully cooked as far as that one's over.
Yeah, I guess you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, Kubernetes side of it is sort of like maybe what happened there. You know, and certainly Brian, you're closer to this than even me. It would be something along the lines of enough interested parties got together. Now, I guess Google ultimately had his first say it was going to be open source, so there's one. But then enough interested parties sort of said, hey, listen, the only other option here is some type of Docker swarm. We don't want there to be a proprietary version of this. So let's all just agree that we're going to use some version of Kubernetes, and we all have a way to make money off of it in some direct or indirect way, like hosting it or repackaging it in a whole nother set of products or something along those lines. So, because in that kind of scenario, it seems like there's enough, if you will, competition out there that the market is both thriving and, you know, people can kind of do what they want. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah. I mean, there haven't been that many Kubernetes kind of projects, right? Like Kubernetes kind of looks like Linux in the sense of like, it got created partially because people were like, we need different infrastructure, and maybe we don't want VMware again, or we don't want AWS. No offense, Coté. Like, we don't want the one vendor to do it. So we're willing to create like a community around something. Like Linux was the same way. Like, we don't want, you know, Unix, or we don't want Windows. We want this other thing. But most of these don't really work that way. I mean, like most of them are like, it's a vendor who drives it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like if you're trying to build a model around this, or let's say you're a VC and you were starting today, and you were looking at this and you were like, should I fund this company's idea? I mean, I feel like it's going to basically boil down to if we sort of agree that, like, let's say $50 million in revenue is a viable number to where somebody would have like an exit, right? Like they could get bought or they could consider going IPO. Will you spend more in money? You know, will you spend more money in operations to turn that software into a SaaS service, or will you spend more money in sales and marketing to get to $50 million? Like, if you could do that kind of math, then you might say, for example, like, should I open source this thing? Because open source is just a replacement for basically free marketing, get the market interested in my thing, build up a brand.
Yeah.
Or you say, this is complicated enough software. The real value is in me operating it for you. And then we go ahead and do that. But like Terraform is one of those ones that's like, it looks probably more like Kubernetes, like it's sort of new infrastructure, like it's a replacement for Ansible or a replacement for Chef or a replacement for Puppet. Lots of people would like to have something like that. I think Adam even said that, like, it'd be nice to, or I know the Pulumi guys were like, it'd be nice to just like a common cloud language. So it kind of fits in that, you know, broad, you know, wide platform thing. But it was only ever adopted by one company, which is the weird part of it. Like Kubernetes and Linux had lots of companies. Nobody was ever like a 15% contributor to it. And I don't know if that was because they wouldn't take pull requests or whatever, but it does feel a little bit unique in that it's sort of single vendor led, but, you know, 8 years into it, we now have all these companies that are trying to build businesses on Terraform, which is a little different in the dynamics of it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you raise a third thing, which, as with most third things, are not sort of the universal decisive thing, but a orthogonal thing to consider, which is to divide things up into two. Like when it comes to, I don't know, this, pardon the phrase, technology innovation, right? There's almost like, there's at least two, if not three phases of the business side that you have to pay attention to. And you hit on the first one, Brian, which is your venture capitalists need an exit. And so whatever it takes for you to do to get to that exit point is the first phase of your life. And that could be being acquired by another company, IPOing. It could be shutting down. It could be selling off to a PE firm. But like, you need to get as much as possible for whatever your investors want as a return, right? And then after that, let's say you become there's probably a phrase for this, your own company. Like, you still obviously like have to show value to your investors or your shareholders, or if you're a private company, whatever you have, but you're sort of like, you're beholden to those things running on yourself. And then of course there's the end state, when you go to the retirement home, and then eventually the PE hospice firm or something like that. Which, it's the natural life cycle of things, which is fine. But I think with the open source thing, it's especially important to pay attention to that first phase, right? Because as you both were alluding to, let me see if I phrase this right. I don't know. The easiest way to get viral adoption, if people still say that, but to do like marketing and get developers and infrastructure people to use software, is to make it freely available, easy to get started using, and then probably open source, right? And so it's almost like, well, in order to get an exit, if we don't actually have to like be profitable, why don't we do that? And then once we move past that milestone, not my problem, right? Like that we'll figure it out past that. And so like, if that perception, I mean, if I'm kind of like, that's kind of like a nefarious tinfoil hat perception of things, but like, if that kind of model changes, then right from the get-go, there's no motivation to do open source stuff, right? Because I think a lot of what these changes in open source stuff business models show is that if you're in that phase 2 or 3 of your life, it's difficult, right? Like you almost want to be like, I wish we hadn't have open sourced this stuff, right, but had the same success.
Well, to that end, a couple numbers are, I don't know if this is a good comparison or not, but I kind of pulled some stuff. I was looking at it. So if we think of Chef, Ansible, and Puppet sort of as sort of that DevOps config management, that's sort of, that part of, I don't know, however many years ago, 10 years ago when that started, I think of the companies that directly preceded that they sort of replaced would be Blade Logic and Opsware, right? So I went back and looked. So BMC bought Blade Logic for $800 million. And then this other one, every time I see it, it just shocks me. HP bought Opsware. This was Mark Andreessen, company at the time, for $1.6 billion. So just kind of do the math there, right? That's $2.4 billion of exits just amongst those two companies. And I think even at the time, I felt like people weren't that happy with those products. I mean, maybe that's revisionist history. And then you think about Chef, Ansible, and Puppet, and so 2 of those went to private equity and 1 went to a strategic vendor. But, when you add that up, I don't think all those numbers are public, but I think it's significantly less. I don't think I'm breaking any news there. And it's sort of like, it just sort of kind of like, if you will, it's kind of the stark reminder of like, okay, well, Chef and Puppet, like, would, if, what's the alternative history? If they'd started just down the road of like a more traditional proprietary version, does their exit look something more like this, something like the 1.6 billion, or was it, just meant to be? And of course, Terraform, different situation, right? Or HashiCorp, I mean, they've made it public, very successful. They've had the $1 billion outcome, and now here they are switching it. So I don't know. This is kind of back to that Adam Jacob kind of question. It's just sort of like, I don't know. I don't know if, Chef certainly got sold, was successful. Same thing with Puppet, was successful in the sense of like, hey, you got a company, it got acquired, it got to some level, but not nearly as successful, I think, as the venture capitalists and the people that invested in it wanted it to be. So I don't know, that is kind of the harsh reality when looking at this. And I think that's kind of where maybe HashiCorp is at. It's like, the harsh reality is that even though they are really successful and they have made billions of dollars, they're still going to live on that same treadmill everyone lives on. They have to grow, right? They have to like make money, they have to build a roadmap, they have to do all those things. So I get where they're coming from, even though it's upset so many people.
Yeah. The one thing would be interesting to know, maybe like Chris from CNCF or something would know this, is like, and Coté mentioned this, like, you don't have to open source something if your intention is just to say like, look, I'm trying to build awareness and I just want a free version for you to do that. It would be really interesting to figure out, like, I don't know, take some number of the CNCF projects, like how many of them have like end user contributions versus like just vendors got involved and they wanted to start, doing that. Because if that's the case, then, we may just see a new wave of things that are they're just freely available, and you don't have to, because if they're freely available, there's always the risk that you have of like, I love this tool, and then it becomes for a fee or something, which, is sort of logical for anything. But like, then you just have sort of the inherent, you don't have to like write a new license to say like, hey, I changed things on you. You just, you figure it out over time. But yeah, it does. I don't know. I feel like HashiCorp is probably a little bit unique in that the timing of their IPO, which was a couple of years ago, so that puts a pressure on them. And then like, they never had this problem until they started building cloud services. And they probably had the problem that, every company with lots of products and multiple priorities have, which is like, we would love to spend way more time building the cloud service, but we have to, put 90% of our resources on selling the software because that's what still makes the money. And that's what, makes the quarterly numbers. And, I mean, like we had the guys from Confluent on Cloudcast a few weeks ago, and they said it took them like 5 years to build their new cloud service. Right. And
Wow.
they had to keep doing the other one as it went along. So it's like, does anybody have that much time to go from software to cloud service? And, like when you have other priorities. And I don't nobody really understands that stuff except for the business.
It's like your business can't get through the air gap. Like you can only be on one side of it. But that is well, speaking of the other side of the air gap, there was also quite an extensive interview with AWS Adam that came out recently on the Coder podcast. And as I was mentioning earlier, thankfully there was a transcript so I could skim through it. Although it looks like it might have, I was to start with a meta thing. I was as someone and the all three of us who interviews a lot of people over the years on our podcast, I was kind of like trying to, no pun intended, decode the interviewing style, because as I was reading through it, we can get to the actual content, but there were very short questions, more very long answers. And, a long answer by something you're bored about is not good, but I'm interested, right? So it was nice to read these like long answers instead of, and the questions kind of provoked things. But then I was realizing maybe they just sent these questions ahead of time, and he stuck to the questions, which could work out that way. But so there, that was a good format. But let's look at the content though. Like what do you feel like came out from this interview, Brandon? What's something novel and interesting that popped out for you?
Well, I think the things that were on there were a couple of the talking points. One is I'm always, as everybody knows, like I'm always interested in like how far into the cloud AWS believes we are. So this time they said 10 to 15% of IT. So again, those playing at home. So okay, we've been at this for 17 years. We are now, let's just say, if we're 10% through, right? You got to do the math. And then if we said, as I said before last week, I think it was like, it's a $200 billion. So we got to add all the clouds together, kind of a rough estimate. So that would say, Selipsky kind of thinking there's a $2 trillion market here, right? For cloud. And that if we're 10% of the way through. And so I think last week I said, well, to get to $1 trillion would probably take us a growth rate of like, around 22% industry wide, and that would only get you to $1 trillion. So if you're going to get to 2 trillion, we're either going to be this at a long, long time, or the growth rates are going to go much higher. Or, as I think, Brian, you've kind of commented on many, many times, it's always in the best interest of AWS to always believe that, that we've just scratched the surface, right? That there's always 90% of the market left. So it's not new, but it's sort of like, to me, the talking point is, I guess they've upped it from maybe 5% when we started really covering this to 15%. But I'd be interested if they ever willing to say like 20 or 30%, because inside of this statement is always this kind of implied assumption that like everything is going to the cloud, right? All this like $2 trillion is going there. And it's like, that's kind of the thing I think that kind of always trips them up. It's like, probably, and this is kind of my day job, like probably not every single workload is moving. No matter what anyone says, that's probably not going to happen. I don't know, Brian, what was your take on that?
Yeah, I didn't see it. There wasn't anything new that he kind of commented there. It was, it's early innings. He tried to do the thing where he went, well, we're a really big business, but we're not a really big business. We're 90 billion, but 90 billion is not that big. So, watch out, we're going to get way bigger. It was interesting. I thought he was sort of interesting in that we've always wondered if he really knew the business that well, because like Andy would talk for 3 hours during keynotes, and you thought, okay, he knows everything about it. There were moments where he sort of started going into some depth on some stuff, and then about 5 minutes into it, he would go back to just his talking points. And so you're sort of like, oh, okay, he like Coté said, like this was a pretty staged interview. But yeah, the only thing that I didn't kind of learn out of it, and I kind of wish I would, and he's probably pretty good at hiding this, is like, usually at some point, if you're going to do these long sort of candid interviews, you're willing to say like, hey, we're a little behind on some stuff, but we're really going to prioritize that. And he made it out like, we're great at everything. We're the best at everything. There's nothing we're behind on. and we're just waiting for our customers to tell us, what to do next. And to a certain extent, like that's fine, except I do sort of feel like that attitude is like, well, where is the AWS innovation? Are you just problem solvers, or can you see around the corner? Because you don't make it out like you can see around the corner. Like Andy used to convey that, like we know where the future is. Adam doesn't seem to say that at all. And maybe that's just because it's not a good talking point.
And I'll tell you this, that part, all your comments, I think really come out during the kind of the AI machine learning part of the interview, right? Because this is the most classic AWS answer of all. Because like, I think it's clear Amazon was a little flat-footed in AI. Like, I just don't think there's any denying it, right? It's sort of like, you look at what everybody's doing, Azure, Google. I mean, both of them are way ahead. I mean, it's just sort of stating fact. I don't think there's anything. But his immediate thing was, no, you're going to want multiple models, right? You won't just want one, and Amazon is the best place to run these models. And then he kind of just gives you the laundry list of like every potential, Llama, Anthropic, just kind of throws them all off. Like everything can run there, but this is where there's kind of no depth, right? And I also think, I think this is kind of back to Nilay Patel, the guy that was interviewing him. I wish there was some pushback there, because I think that whole idea that like everyone's going to want a different model, I think it's a nice, like, it's sort of a nice CEO answer, but I think there's a real thing to say, well, you know what, one of these could get good enough that like most people will just use this one model, right? Kind of like a search engine. It's like, sure, there's lots of different search engines, and like occasionally maybe you go to Indeed to search jobs, but really you're going to Google 90% of the time, right? And I think inside of this is like at least the potential that like, hey, there's going to be some dominant model. Most people are just going to use that. And, AWS really hasn't shown anything on that end, right? They're announcing models and they eventually will have them. And then finally, I think too, he's like very dismissive of like, credit to Microsoft and OpenAI for popularizing it, because he just kind of gives the answer of like, we've been doing this for years. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like kind of my days at IBM, where it's sort of like, oh, like we've been doing this for years. And it's like, yeah, but like it wasn't easy to see. We haven't seen it, right? Just saying that like, oh, we have Amazon and we've been using this for retail and we've been doing this other ways. It's like, I don't know. It really rang very hollow to me. It's like, well, if what's impressive is like showing everybody what you've been doing and letting people touch it, not just talking about it. So, and I do think to your point, like there's a place I really wanted more depth, but it really, he kind of got in there, and then we just kind of went back to like, he probably listed, I said a few of them, he probably listed 50 different AI models. And I was, at some point you're just reciting a list. Like, I don't, nobody knows what all these things do.
Right. Well, I guess I'm, depending on what you like, famous or infamous around here for this, but like I could have done with a lot less chip talk. It's just like chips. Who the fuck cares, right? Chips come and go. You can either make enough of them, they get faster. What's the price? Big deal, right? Like, obviously, it's more important than that. But like, yeah, it would have been. And then there was a little bit, of course, like ethics of AI stuff. But there is, you two are throwing out some interesting thing there, which is, if you are already doing this, why didn't you just put a chat interface on top of it? And like many people do have one now, but like, so why don't you do that? Right. Like where's the focus on making this easy and cheap and understandable to consume? Which I mean, this is it's hard to think what is good and bad in this area. But it's gotten to the point in the AI world now where there's almost like too much choice, and it's hard to kind of separate out like the, you like go to the gas station, especially in the States. Here they're a little more like refined, no pun intended with sugar, but you go to the gas station and you've got that candy that like has a battery, and you push a button and the lollipop thing turns around, and it's like gimmicky candy and like weird stuff. And then there's just like the Bounty or the Mars bar or the Snickers bar. It's just the good stuff, right? And like I feel like the AI world is now just like twirling lollipops. Like it's hard to figure out like what is good and bad and stuff like that. So like there could be a little more like discussion of and development from trusted sources of like, this is like good, high quality, useful AI stuff, instead of all that chip.
Yeah, and I think the opportunity he missed to me was, I think you, Brian, were alluding to this earlier. It's sort of like, if you're going to engage in this interview and you're trying to get me to, be excited or to listen more closely, like you've got to say something that that you've got to win, if you will, over some kind of like legitimacy with me. And so at one point he talks about how they've been doing AI with Alexa. And like anyone that has used Alexa, like you like, this is not good. You know what I mean? Like there's only a few things you can do: timer, weather, music. And it's like, it's just not credible, right? It's just 100% not credible. And that's the point where I think you like really missed opportunity. I like, if I was there, I would, you know, and again, one of the 8 million reasons I'm not CEO of AWS would be something like, you know, say something like, it's been really impressive to see what OpenAI has done and how exciting they built this new chat-based interface. And you would say something like, you know, we've done a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but we have not done that. And we are watching closely, and, you know, here's our plans, or here's where we're going to do it. And like, give something other than to be like, oh, we've been doing this with Alexa, because like, we've all been using Alexa for years. And like, I'm sure everyone's had the same experience. You never like, this is so great. You know, it solved my problem. You never have that feeling.
Well, and they you hear people talk about this a lot, like Ben Thompson will talk about this. He's pretty good at this. Like at the end of the day, everybody ends up being good at something. So like, you know, so Google is great at, you know, they're great at data, and then, you know, like AI and stuff on top of data, but they're basically great at taking that and making it into stuff that just sort of takes care of stuff for you. So like Maps is better because they do AI stuff behind the scenes, or search is better because of that. And then like Microsoft is very good at going like, the thing you want from me is sort of packaged applications, right? So we're good at exposing packaged applications, or Apple is good at building devices, but they're not very good at building services. And Amazon or AWS has always been really good at being like, we are going to be great at giving you a toolbox, right? Like, we're not great at integration. We're not great at user interfaces. We're going to give you a toolbox, and the toolbox is going to keep getting bigger. And so whatever you want to do, there'll always be a ratchet that's the right size, or a screwdriver that's, you know, you got 17. And he basically just reiterated that, like, we don't know what you want to do with it, but we're going to, you know, we're going to give you all the tools. And it was kind of a weird way of saying it, because there's times when Amazon or like AWS will announce stuff. It's always at the very end of keynotes where they'll do stuff like, they'll go, hey, we've been doing this stuff inside of our factories for 5 years, and now we're announcing, you know, AWS factorization, you know, Factory Plus, where it's like, oh, cool, you get automatic robotic stuff. So it's like, they have times when they're like, we're going to basically turn whatever we do internally into a service. It was weird that he was like, I mean, they're in a lot of really big businesses. They're huge in search. They're huge in supply chain. They're huge in logistics. They're huge in, you know, transportation and stuff. And then, which all those things I'm sure require like, you know, large language models and image models and other stuff to recognize, but they didn't, you know, they're not leading in any of them. Like, they're not driving, which is kind of crazy for a company that has that much data and processes that much of their own internal data. They're not like, you know, like Facebook was like, here's the Lambda thing, it's based on stuff we do. Google's like, here's the Bard stuff, it's based on stuff we do. And Amazon's like, hey, we have partnerships with everybody else's data set. And you're like, you know, maybe it's just, I don't want to give my internal stuff away, but it didn't convey any idea of like, hey, if you want to be in whatever, like, we've already done that for 5 years. We're really good at it. And here's, you know, here's the commercial version of it.
Yeah. You know, I mean, there's two things. Three things. One, following from what you were just saying, like, I think my theory, which is to say, I'm not sure if it's true, is that, and I don't think this was in the Working Backwards book, but I feel like one of the unstated principles of Amazon is never create your competitor, right? Like, and in fact, they try to do the opposite of that. Like, they try to find people who they can now compete with, hence the first part of our show. And so, like, it would be weird if Amazon, well, if you know, following the logic of that theory, like, if all the things that the whole Amazon is good at and has been doing for 5-10 years, they probably don't want to like open source their supply chain and logistics business, so to speak, right? And like how you would do that. So but like, maybe there's some limiter on that. And then that gets to the second and third thing, which is like, you know, in our corny way around here, like, you're making me think that like Amazon is the opposite of the defaults lifestyle. They're just like, there are no defaults. Right. Like, it's everything that you can, I mean, to use the analogy, right? It's as they'd say over here, a DIY store, or it's a hardware store, like a Home Depot thing. And like, Apple is the ultimate defaults lifestyle. we have made choices for you because they are the best, no questions, right? Like just like, and if you would like to use something else, we get a 30% cut, right? Which I think is a fair trade-off for that position. And then Microsoft is almost like, it's somewhere in the middle there, but I would almost position it as like it's a defaults lifestyle, just maybe not the one that you want, when or it's a toolkit that's available. And so like, I don't know, that's something fun there. But I think the third thing is that like it is like, well, I guess the third thing is that in case any of us want to get a job at AWS, it'd be good to say some positive things about the interview, which is, I think one, like when I was reading through the interview, right? Like I was thinking like, okay, where is this interview happening? The questions being asked, who's the people listening to it? And I think the best part of the interview from that perspective is, even though all three of us, especially Brandon, like scholar of how AWS and Amazon works, like you read the FAQ thing and the PR thing and the customer first and the single stream thing, and you're like, yeah, I get it. I should be flossing my teeth 3 times a day. Thank you very much, right? like no problem. But like that was said in a pretty good way, I think, for someone who hasn't read all this stuff over the years stated. And then also, I mean, as pointed out right at the beginning, I think even for us, the old hardened business travelers and connoisseur of enterprise software marketing, I think the discussion around airport ads, fantastic. I think that was well done. And I was just like, yes, exactly.
But I thought there were inside of the maybe we'll talk a little bit about the message side of it, the meta side of communications or executive communications now. But like, I actually thought the most damning part of the interview, right, was when the interviewer in this case,
like, I'm never going to work there, so I'm just
well, I don't know. I just jumps out to me, right? Well, hey, listen, there's one of the management principles is about like speaking your mind, right? So that's the one I always cite, like when I'm like, hey,
I haven't thought of that.
Okay, I'm just speaking mind, because I was like, because the thing that I have in tremendous respect for is AWS and all Amazon executives are so on message. Like if you've ever been to media training, they teach you how to do it. But these people are next level. Like everything is on message, right? But for the first time in a while, I've been like, this was so on message that maybe it worked against them a little bit. And the reason I'm saying that is that in the interview, in reference to AI, he says something like, we're 3 steps into a 10K race, right? And then after the long answer, Nilay, the interviewer in this case, says like, hey, my producer told me you were going to say that, right? And I think and Selipsky, like he took it well. He was like, congratulations to your producer. But listen, I think that is about as big a shot you can take in an interview, like a body blow, like getting hit in the right hand and not seeing it. Because if I'm interviewing you and I can predict the talking points, right, that you're going to say, it means that like people are starting to tune it out, right? Like you're just always going to say X. So what is the point of asking you X, right? Now, a communications professional would say, that means your message is resonating. You're getting it out repetitively and people are getting it and things like that. But I think when the interviewer is actually calling it out in the moment it's happening, right? And because the rest of the stuff we all could predict. It was like literally, I have the list here. It was all the cliches, working backwards, press releases, customer exception, self-directed teams. And it was just like this, nothing new. Like, I mean, this is so, again, I realize I hear this a lot, so maybe it was reaching some new people. But like when he gets to like the places where you could really expand on it, like they have some awesome customers, right? He's got Ferrari in the NFL. I'm a sports fan and O'Brien's a sports fan, but he's got several others in there, like Travelers as well. But when he's talking, he is literally just listing them. And I am like, man, you could tell great stories about Ferrari, right? Like I even thought to myself, does Selipsky even know, could he name the drivers of Ferrari? Right? Does he even know who they are? Has he actually watched an F1 race? Or the same thing in the NFL? Like, has he watched, like, he should pick one of these out and like connect to it. Be like, I was watching the NFL game and I was watching the field goal, or I was watching the F1 race and like know something about it. But like, he just says them so fast, or like pick something obscure, like I think Bridgewater, huge hedge fund. Maybe he's into that. Like he could tell a story about that. Right. But it's like, it doesn't, it just comes across so robotic that I feel like he's kind of losing a little bit. Like, they say a great politician can like do the message, but connect, right? And it's just like, I don't know. Like, this is maybe where I think Jassy could. Like, Jassy would pause. He's a huge NFL fan or something. Like, he'd pick one of these and tell you something interesting about it that you didn't know. And I don't know. I felt like Selipsky kind of missed that opportunity. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think he was there at the beginning, so obviously he sort of knows the history of stuff, but he's now in the mode of like, I inherited this business that is far and away the most profitable one at Amazon. Like, it's not his place to go rogue, if you will. And it's a weird spot. Well, and it's a weird spot to be, because quite honestly, like, every time, like, if he had said, look, we're twice as big as the next competitor, which, hey, once in a while it's okay to actually mention the people you compete against, but that's fine. We're twice as big as the next competitor. We're 4 times as big as the one after that. And we're 40% into this race. That's when you can start being like, look, we're really dominant. We're really whatever. But in essence, he's saying, look, we're on this side of the crossing the chasm, right? We 10, 15%, you're on the left side of crossing the chasm. And if you're just in the mode of like, I just say the same things over and over again, it does sort of make you question, when it's like, if you put that together with the, like, you've become very repetitive, and the people that are most worried about you are the open source companies that you're just basically taking their software from, or the projects, I almost walk away from it like, are you still as innovative as you were before? Because you used to be innovative of like, I'm going to take toil away from the old stuff. But now if you're competing against sort of in a new game, like, are you prepared to do that, right? Like, it's sort of the, wartime consigliere versus peace consigliere. I don't know. He's only been there a few quarters, but you wonder if, like, that's his personality, or if he's just so jammed down by Amazon PR that's just the way he's going to do every interview.
Yeah, I think you hit it exactly right. Cause that's what I wanted. Cause kind of halfway through, I was like, this is like a 90% Jassy, right? And it did strike me though about how similar Bezos, Jassy, and Selipsky are. Like, maybe that's just like literally, they're copying each other. I mean, there's like kind of like some mimic, but it is kind of amazing. Like, when they speak, you could almost just interchange any one of them, right? Whereas, but I think the only thing that's different is like, Bezos is the most willing to say whatever he wants. Like, if there's something kind of interesting, he'll say something probably, the most provocative. I think Jassy's like one notch down, but I think he would say stuff, right? He'd say, and I think you're right. Selipsky's probably got to be the most, if you will, conservative with his statements. And maybe, I think the answer to your thing about Coté, to go back to it, is like, I mean, the flip side of this, and this is like a very good critique of what I've been saying, is like, Selipsky just be like, hey, listen, I'm running a $90 billion business here. I think we're doing really, really well. This all communication professionals think I'm kicking ass, and like, who are you to question anything I've done? And I'd be like, yeah, it's probably a good point, right? And he probably will. Like, if he runs this business over the next 10 years, he will make hundreds of millions of dollars. I will unlikely make the same kind of money. And so, I mean, there's like nothing I can say other than that, other than just watching it though. But I just feel like, like, to me, it's sort of like, what's the saying? There's no crying in baseball. Like, is there no joy at all at AWS? I just sort of like, you have all these cool customers, you're doing all these cool things. Like, don't you ever stop just to see like the thing that you're interested in? Like, I'd be at the F1 race, I'd be like, man, this is awesome. I'd be telling F1 stories all the time, or football stories, or whatever. And I think just inside of this is like, there got to be something in there other than just like writing PR memos and things like that. Like, go out and like really learn what your customers are doing, and like be impressed by it, and like have that come through your interviews. I mean, I would enjoy that.
Well, first of all, Brandon, when it comes to yourself, I think what you need to realize is that we're just 3 steps into a 10K race when it comes to podcasting. So I really wouldn't like sell yourself short like that. I think, Brian might be 5 steps into a 5K race, but like, we got to get past that water line, pick some stuff up. They give out sponges nowadays. Just think of the pickup you can get from that. And then, I think another interesting thing to think about with the interview is kind of to a points a lot of you two are making is, so if you were to read only this, like, what does AWS think its differentiation is? Like what makes it unique, right? Because like, sure, what was it, 80, 90, 70, however many $1 billion, like, that's awesome, right? But like what did they talk about? What did he talk about most that is like different maybe than other people. So the first thing is he was basically like, it works, right? Like we have better uptime, which I don't know the studies, but like, sure. Like, our stuff breaks less often. I have no idea. So that's always a good claim. Our stuff works better.
And then he had the more secure, right? He said we're a lot more secure. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so let's bundle that into functionally we're better, right? Like we have better, the way that we run is better. And then I think we kind of talked about this already, but we talked about both of the two already. Like the other thing that like is interesting to think about, especially in my world of like digital transformation or just getting better at stuff, is like, and y'all were kind of making this point with like how similar and disciplined people will be, is they really do cherish their culture. Like he mentioned many times about the principles, and actually his discussion about how the culture applies and what customer first means was even more detailed than his little bit of detail about how they are helping the NFL with like tracking footballs and stuff, which I have no basis for this, but even I know I was reading that and I was like, I'm pretty sure everyone would say that's ruining the game, but never mind. Like, that's just an old person comment, right? Like maybe the young kids love it. But like, so there is that, like our culture, how we operate as a differentiating thing. And then there's what I think, Brian, you raised, is that like, and I guess my trailing question here is like, would Amazon ever say we're a toolbox, right? Like, would they ever like really commit to like, we don't really have opinions of how you're going to do this stuff. We'll just give you all the tools, right? So in contrast, I mean, the ultimate contrast as always is Apple, who would say like, no, take it or leave it, or give us 30%, right? Like, it's just sort of like, it's prohibitive to like think of the Apple platform as a toolbox. Like that's not what they want their customers, how they want them to think about it.
Well,
I don't know, but that seems like there's three key points there.
Yeah. I mean, he did seem to distinctly go back to this idea that like, there's no difference between AI and the cloud. Like the cloud is AI and AI is the cloud, which is almost him doubling down on like, and he did have some statement where he said like, oh no, we're only 1/10 of 1% into a 10,000, yard race or whatever it was. Like that seemed to be the thing he came back to. Like, we're not going to, we've spent 15 years defining the cloud. We're not about to sort of, let somebody else redefine like what the cloud is. The cloud is, it's an operating model and it's technology and it's this and it's that. And
yeah,
that felt like, whereas like in the case of Apple, in your kind of analogy, like Apple is just doubling down all the time on like human experiences. Yes, there's technology involved, but it's human experiences, and there's no end to what human experiences would be. They're basically trying to say like, there's no end to what the cloud is. The cloud is, the cloud is just this $3 billion future that
right.
we'll all get to. The other thing I thought was interesting, and Brandon, you'll appreciate this. Like, sometimes you do these things, like, the PR people set up this type of interview, and it's obviously kind of a giant softball, and you kind of go, well, who's the audience for this thing, right? Because it's not the tech nerds. Because other than saying like, AI wouldn't exist without cloud, like as we've talked about for 45 minutes here, like there was nothing new in there. He's not speaking to Wall Street, because Wall Street already knows what their numbers are and what they're doing and so forth. Like, I kind of wondered who they think they were talking to. And the one group that I don't think he was talking to at all, but he should have been, was like, if I'm somebody from Amazon, I'm an AWS employee, and like football coaches do this all the time. They get out and they rant about stuff. Like they'll say, oh, we were terrible in practice and we're going to get killed by this team this weekend. Like, he didn't convey any sense of like, hey, those of you working on AI internally with AWS, get your shit together. Because we're like, he didn't convey that at all.
Right.
And so you wonder if like the AWS people internally are like, hey man, we're doing great. A+ for us. He didn't, and like,
the only thing remotely like that he did is they discussed layoffs.
Yeah.
And there was, like, you're making me remember, there was a moment that was like kind of a level of, if you'll pardon the phrase, there was a moment of candor that I don't really expect. And like it was like wrapped up and like a little marbled in how it was said. But he basically said, we laid off people who we didn't think could learn new things. Right. Like he was like, we looked at our businesses. We don't need this business anymore. I'm not quoting here at all. This is just the way I thought about it. Like we looked at we wanted to reduce them, and we tried to move people and give them new things to do if we thought they fit. But some people, they just didn't fit anymore. Right. So we couldn't like retrain them. And so that was like, I mean, and I'm agreeing with your point. Like that was kind of the only, other than the raw stuff, and we're awesome, which is always fine. But there wasn't the instructive criticism of employees, except for that one moment, as I recall.
Yeah. And he didn't, the other thing is, I wonder, like they used to go after subtly, they would go after Oracle, like in keynotes, they'd be like, you know, basically like that old database company or that database company that's auditing you. Like he could have said like, look, you know, I know people are enamored with ChatGPT, but let's be honest, like, you know, that's only come along in the last 6 months. It's not even homegrown technology from Microsoft. They don't own it. It's, you know, prohibitively expensive. Like he could have, you know, taken one example of that and sort of been like, it, you know, yes, it's a big deal, but we're this much bigger than those guys. Like stop being so enamored with this, you know, kind of toy, and, you know, look at the underlying, you know, things going on, which, you know, he kind of did by saying like, look, we have all the GPUs, but I don't think it came across as, I don't think you understand how big our moat is because we have all the GPUs or because we have whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I think, you know, where that came in, because I think on the AI side, like his talking points were clearly like, they have the chips. I know, Coté, you enjoy that part, right? They have every model, you know, every model known to man. That was the next thing, right? And then, you know, a lot of talk about data. Like we have the data is here, right? And then, you know, and then secure, right? And then he kind of like made fun of some of the people that aren't, you know, providing in a secure way. And so that's all fine though. But like, if we're in a product pitch, it's sort of like, you've laid it all out. Now, the way to bring that home, right, is to be like, and you can see it here, right? Here's what the company's doing it. Here's how you can try it. Here's exactly what we're doing in retail, right? And the retail experience is great. Whatever it is, right? You got to pick something up and like, because that's your last proof point. Whereas I can go to ChatGPT and I'm like, you know, whenever it works, I'm always like, this is a miracle, right? Or Bard or whatever. And they don't have that. And that's the part that I think, like, to me, if I was like, I guess I am critiquing the press side, is like, that was the complete miss, because the cliches, working backwards, press release, customer obsession, self-directed teams, those answers were so incredibly long, right? To the point of like, you know, I'm just like, I'm almost on like triple speed trying to get through this part, right? To get him to finish that. But like, that's the part where like, he should be giving that length of an answer to connect all the things he said, and then give me something to go do, right? Go touch this, go see this. When you're watching this game, right? Watch this specific thing. And this is how Charles Leclerc is going to win, you know, the next race at F1, right? And it's like, that's the part I think is just hollow, right? So maybe they have it. Maybe just, you know, his talking points, he was stronger on the culture stuff. But again, that would always be back to like, if you're stronger on the culture stuff, and one of the cultural principles is customer obsession, but you can't talk to the customer in like an obsessive way, how they're solving a problem, like maybe you're missing it, right? Even though you say it, maybe you're missing it. So to me, that's like sort of like, I don't know, the missing link in that whole interview was that to me.
Well, you know, to close it out, I've got two thoughts. One, I you know, just like you, Brian, and I'm sure you too, Brandon, like the first thing when I was reading this article is like, who is this for, right? Like you always like learn when you're in the content creation world to figure out your audience real quick. And like, I don't know, maybe like, so it was in The Verge, right? And that might be one of the only tech news sites left that's not terrible. Like there's a few other ones, right? Like I think The Register's still hanging out there, and you know, you've got good articles here and there, like the old ZDNet world of stuff, like, or Ziff Davis stuff, like has good stuff here and there. But like, if you wanted to be in like the tech world, if you wanted to like be on the tech world record, there wouldn't be that many places you could go, right? Just to kind of like get that annual, like, here's the big interview thing. You're definitely not going to go to The Register. That would be a bad idea. And they don't even have a podcast. So you're not going to be going there. And I mean, there's really not, I don't know. I'd have to go check. So one, there's that, like, and it's a totally different thing if you go to the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or whatever. But two, to that end, I want to suggest to the PR, or as they like to say nowadays, the comms world, that you need to introduce a new format. And I'm going to call it the 3-hour interview. Because I think what we really want is we want like a 3-hour interview like this, right? But it just lots of digging in and detailing, asking questions. We could even have an intermission. That's fine. But like really, you want to just have as long an interview as possible where you can really just be like, let's talk about those chips. Let's go deep. Like, I forgot if it was a trillium or a titanium or a titanium. Let's spend 30 minutes on that. And just like really, and we don't even have to talk the technology of it. But as you I think as you, Brandon, you were getting to, like, it would be a fascinating conversation to talk for 30 minutes about, like, what is the business strategy of I have all of the chips, right? Like, and what do you do about that? Or like the thing I would be curious about is like, so like, and if this would be, no one would answer this, but it's sort of like, so if it's going to be a $1 trillion or a $2 trillion business, how much of that are you going to own before antitrust lawyers come knocking on your door, right? So let's figure out like what the valid things are here. I don't know, so forth and so on. It'd be fun to ask those questions and have a 3-hour interview. But if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to help consult and kind of figure out the format for that.
Sounds like he needs to go on the podcast, and Brian can ask all these hard questions. That's what I like.
Yeah.
No,
I just think 3-hour interview. The only constraint is that once it is to 3 hours, it just stops recording, like the old Bright Talk thing, where it would just cut you off at the end of an hour.
It would be now. Like, obviously, we love software defined talk, the Cloudcast, the changelog. I mean, there are like much longer form technical stuff that people could ask a lot of questions. I'm sure he would feel like those were all beneath him, but like it would be interesting. Like, get somebody in there that's really followed it closely, right? Like they're experts in it. It'd be interesting to like match them with somebody that really knows the product line well. I'd welcome that.
And we could even have some concessions as far as user friendliness, and we could be like, listen, it's going to be a 3-hour interview, but we're going to do it in the style of a Rick Rubin podcast, where we're very encouraging. We say good words. We might even start with a mindfulness session. However, just as he does, we are actually going to dig into the essence of things, ask a lot of questions. We're going to figure shit out, right? So I think that would be a good format to explore. Well, speaking of figuring things out, Brandon, do we have any bureaucracy this episode?
We do. Got a couple things. So Professor Jeremy, he's the official Software Defined Talk correspondent at DevOps Day Chicago. So this is his trip report. So he said Kubernetes is still hard. Yep, check. Observability was in full force as a vendor premise. So got it. Yeah, makes sense. AWS was on the receiving end of many presentation jokes. So I don't know. Maybe he needs to go to DevOps Day. And John Willis was there. Still cool. And he talked about his new, is it Deming or Deming's book? I don't know. How to say that. Deming's book. So good to hear Professor Jeremy's doing well in Chicago. Also, in huge news, probably something that The Verge will cover, the Software Defined Talk thread it hits 10,000 messages. So I know we have some new listeners here. So a quick history here is Matt Ray posted a message several years ago. I can't even remember exactly what it was. And some people responded to it as replies, and it became a thread. And that thread has now taken on a life of its own. It's now at 10,000 messages. Anyone can join the Software Defined Talk Slack. And I don't know, we're starting to reach a little bit some weird bugs. So you can probably find the thread. It may take a little effort. It may take a little bit of time to load. Of course, you can't read it because we're on the free trial. So we have to wait till we get our free, or we're on the free plans. We'll have to wait till we get our free trial. Then you can go back and read all 10,000 messages.
So here's my question. So the thread has always been free to Software Defined Talk, Slack people. Like, at what point are you guys going to change the license on that one thread?
That's a good point. We may have to make it BSL. We may have to go BSL because I'm going to look into that. I'm going to look into see what happens. So congratulations to everyone that's posted a message in the thread. And then finally, if you would like stickers, as always, just send your postal address to me at stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world.
I mean, that's a great accomplishment for the thread, but I feel like I read a report recently that engagement actually had dropped by 70% since its initial release and early usage. Well, there's several conferences coming up. August 21st to 22nd, there's Kubernetes Community Day Australia. Now, next week, if I've done my math correctly, August 21st to 24th in Las Vegas. There's Spring One and VMware Explore US. I've been doing some work on the Spring One keynote session. It should be fun. As ever, you should tune in and see if you can figure out which jokes I put in there lasted. I think there might be at least one. I'm not sure. And then September 6th and 7th, I'll be at DevOps Days Des Moines in Iowa, checking out what's going on there. And there's KubeCon coming up November 6th and 9th in North America somewhere. That one's in Chicago, I think.
Yep.
And there's also October 6th, going back slightly in time, is Kubernetes Communities Days, Texas. And then, of course, our favorite, which I still need to go to one day, there's that conference, January 29th. I think their CFP is open. But if you want to get there's a few others I think I didn't mention, but if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/428, you can find those out. And also in my newsletter, which is available at newsletter.cote.io, I list out all the events and things I'll be doing, usually, unless I forget to do it, which only happens. I'm working on that. I don't always forget. But you can check that out at my newsletter, which you should also subscribe to, which I think is great. Now, with that, we'll do guests, as we would say in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, Advantage. That's actually not what it is. You win initiative, Brandon. I'm sorry, Brian. I did this last time, didn't I? But in reverse. You remember that? I switched y'all's names up. Yeah. Anyways, with such searing great insights on everything, it's so difficult to keep you two apart. Anyways,
good recovery.
Brian, what is your recommendation?
I don't have any great ones. I'm not as prolific a reader or writer as you. By the way, Coté, I just noticed you came out with another 175-page book, so congratulations on that. I'm not sure where you find the time. I have two quick recommendations. They're both newsletters. They're both AI related. One's called The Rundown and one's called Prompts Daily. Basically, The Rundown is this guy finds a bunch of good new AI tools sort of every single day or every 3 or 4 times a week. So it's a kind of a good skim to find if there's anything that might save you, half an hour a day. And then there's another guy who does the Prompts Daily, which is just basically, if you want this sort of output, here's a bunch of like known good prompts. So kind of a quick and dirty way of getting like productive AI stuff, not the stuff that we talked about today about, chips and other useless stuff.
How about yourself, Brandon? What do you recommend?
All right, a couple of quick things here. I've went and saw Oppenheimer with the family this weekend. It was good. So it is as advertised, 3 full hours. I thought it was a little slow at the beginning, but then I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done, very well acted. I'm scared. I will say this though, I'm scared to like recommend anything because like everything is eventually torn down and told to be false because I don't have that much history. Like I have only the basic history of like what went on. So I thought it was really good. I'm like, oh, it seems like that's what happened. Now I feel like in about 6 months, there's going to be a podcast that like just destroys this movie and tells me why everything is wrong about it. Just like one of my favorite writers, Michael Lewis. People are starting to look closely at his book called The Blind Side, which I like. So now again, I'm gonna have to feel bad about reading that one. So there you go. So go watch Oppenheimer before anyone tells you it's all wrong and it was bad. So go watch it and enjoy it. And also just because like everyone's talking about Taylor Swift, I don't really have any Taylor Swift content, but I just wanted to get my prediction out there like others. Like I'm almost positive she will be the Super Bowl halftime show this year, and it will definitely destroy the internet because I think Taylor Swift has taken over the world, and credit to her. So there you have it. Those are my 2 recommendations.
Yeah, they just got to use AWS. It can handle it. Has better performance than the other ones. No problem. Well, I think what's good to remember about any recommendation you give, Brandon, is that like those who are satisfied do not speak. Like it's only people who are grumpy who talk. So like there's always, I guess you could say I'm making a similar allusion to Nixon's silent majority, which I'm not intentionally, but like, just like, you always got to remember whoever's talking is probably in the minority.
Well, I think you're the one who started this. Were you the one that said books could kill? It's like now that podcast and several others, it's just like everything eventually gets destroyed. You're like, I feel bad about everything.
Yeah. So that one is, I don't know.
It's good though. I like it. Hey, listen, I want the truth. Anyway, go ahead.
No, it's still good. They should institute a policy where it's like we're only going to say positive things for 10 minutes, and just like and like that. It would be the most damning part of a review if they were like, I really like the color orange they picked for the book cover, right? Like, I think that would be great. Well, I've got a follow up. Someone asked. I mentioned Bruce Sterling or Bruce last week, and that Bruce, yes, is Bruce Sterling. If I was saying he has a very unique and to my taste, fantastic way of speaking. Right, like it takes a little getting used to. You're kind of like, what's happening here? Like, does this guy know what he's doing? But like, it's pretty good. And if you want to see some examples, just Google for like Bruce Sterling SXSW South by Southwest videos, and just look at his annual keynotes. And they're again, they're pretty good. They're their own thing. Now, my recommendation, I'm actually calling in remotely. I'm in a hotel, and it's the first time I've stayed at the Elements brand of Marriott, which I want to say that Elements is maybe like the W Hotel of Residence Inns. Like it's a similar situation where you have like, you've got like the kitchen situation and it's intended for an extended stay, as they say. And this one is brand new. It's in Zoud in Amsterdam. And I have to say, it is probably as nice, if not nicer, than most of the high-end Marriott hotels I've stayed in. And that might just be because it's brand new, but I think it's pretty good. Now, the only disadvantages are going to be that it is significantly cheaper. Well, I don't know, at least a third cheaper than staying at like a Marriott or a Westin or, God forbid, a JW Marriott. So if you're monitoring your minimum spend to reach your Titanium Elite qualification, that might be a problem. But you're definitely going to get the same night. So you pull up a spreadsheet and see if you can balance out the spend versus the nights, because I think it's pretty good. It's not so bad at all. Well, with that, speaking of things that are pretty good and not so bad at all, you've been listening to another episode of Software Defined Talk. First of all, thanks, Brian, for being on this episode. It was great.
Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to it. And you should check out, if you don't know, that Brian and Aaron do the Cloudcast. It's .net, right? You can go to cloudcast.net. Yeah. It's he does fantastic and I mean this in a good way. He's sort of like the Andy Rooney of cloud podcast. He's got a good Sunday thing, and they're always in the prime, in the good time before the whole "why did Kurt Cobain kill himself?" Andy Rooney. So, like they're fantastic. I look forward to them all the time. They're good stuff. So you should check that out if you don't listen to the Cloud Cast. And if you want to get the show notes for this episode, links to everything, lots of things we didn't cover, go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/428. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
All right, Coté, good job as always. Thanks to everyone in the chat there. I see Michael. He said you did a good job, Ryan. So, well done. That's high praise. And also, Ryan's already, one, I did not see Barbie, and Ryan's already telling me why Oppenheimer was bad. So that was good. Good to have Ryan on. Always appreciate the immediate feedback about why
the Japanese might view Oppenheimer differently.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. I feel like even commenting on it would just get me in trouble. But I don't know. What can I say? I still enjoyed the movie. So, all right. So everyone, thanks again to Brian. For everyone that hung with us on the stream today, we really appreciate it. We'll probably be back next week around this time, assuming Matt Ray makes a quick and full recovery. And until then, we will talk to all the streamers next time.